My name is Alexander, though most people in my family used to call me Alex. I was born into a family of 3 boys. I was the eldest, followed by Andrei and then Maxim, the youngest. Growing up, we weren't the kind of brothers who always got along. We fought over toys, argued about games, and competed in everything from who could run fastest to who could eat the most pancakes at breakfast. Yet, despite all of that rivalry, we were bound together by something deeper than simple brotherhood. That something was my grandmother's house by the lake. The house wasn't grand or luxurious. It wasn't a mansion with high ceilings or polished floors. It was a simple, wooden, 2-story house with faded blue shutters and a creaky front porch that looked out across the still, silver waters of the lake. The air there always smelled like pine trees, wet soil, and the faint sweetness of wildflowers that grew along the path to the shore. For us, that house wasn't just a building. It was a world of its own. It was where summer felt endless, where winter was magical, and where the warmth of our grandmother's love made everything feel safe. Grandmother, her name was Elena, was the heart of that place. She was a small woman with silver hair always tied back in a bun, and eyes that carried both the softness of kindness and the firmness of wisdom. She lived in that house all her life. She raised her children there, and later, she welcomed us, her grandchildren, every school holiday. She had this way of making the ordinary extraordinary. A walk by the lake became an adventure, filled with stories about forest spirits and water nymphs. A meal of bread and soup felt like a feast, because she filled it with laughter and conversation. And at night, when the cicadas sang and the stars spilled across the sky, she would sit us by the fireplace and tell us tales, some real, some imagined, that we would never forget. I remember one evening particularly well. I must have been 10, which would make Andrei 7 and Maxim just 5. We sat by the fire, the room lit only by the crackling flames and the faint glow of a kerosene lamp. The shadows danced across the wooden walls, and the air smelled of burning pinewood. Listen carefully, my boys, grandmother began, her voice low and steady. This house is not just wood and stone. It is memory. It carries the laughter of your parents when they were children, the tears of joy and sorrow of our family, the warmth of every embrace. A house like this is not to be sold or wasted. It is to be cared for, protected, and cherished. Maxim, too young to understand, was already half asleep on her lap. Andrei looked confused, frowning as he tried to grasp her words. But I understood, at least partly. I felt the weight of what she was saying. That house was more than a place to sleep or eat. It was a symbol of family, of belonging. Our summers there were nothing short of magical. We would wake to the sound of birdsong and the shimmering light of dawn reflecting on the lake surface. Grandmother always insisted on breakfast together. Fresh bread she baked herself, butter, eggs from the neighbor's farm, and berries we picked ourselves. After breakfast, we were free to roam. We built makeshift forts in the forest behind the house, played hide and seek among the tall pines, and dared each other to swim farther out into the lake than we had the day before. Andrei was always reckless, always pushing the limits. He would climb the tallest trees, jump into the lake from rocks, and run barefoot over sharp stones, refusing to admit pain. Maxim, on the other hand, was cautious, often trailing behind us, watching, hesitant to take risks. I often felt responsible for him, like a second parent rather than a brother. At night, after the adventures, we'd sit on the porch, eating watermelon or roasted corn, while grandmother told us more stories. Sometimes they were about her own youth, the war years, the hardships she endured, the way she and grandfather built the house with their own hands. Other times, they were fairy tales with lessons hidden beneath their words. Even when we grew older, the house remained a sanctuary. When school became stressful, when city life felt too loud, too crowded, we knew we could retreat to the lake. It was always waiting, unchanged, eternal. But, as with all things, childhood fades. We grew up. Our visits became less frequent. I went to university in another city. Andrei got into business early, and Maxim. Well, Maxim was always uncertain about what he wanted. Grandmother grew older, slower, but she never stopped keeping the house alive. Even when her hands trembled and her back ached, she still baked bread for us when we came. still kept the fireplace ready, still welcomed us with that same endless love. When she passed away, it was quiet and gentle, as if the house itself sighed and knew its guardian was gone. I was the one who was there at the time. I held her hand in that small bedroom with the lace curtains, listening as her breaths grew shallower. She whispered to me, "Alex, the house. Keep it safe. Promise me." And I promised. After the funeral, when the lawyer read her will, it was revealed that the house was left to me alone. Not to the three of us, not shared, but solely to me. Andre and Maxim were shocked. They didn't understand. They thought it was unfair, that it should have been divided equally. But the lawyer explained that grandmother had written her will carefully. She believed I was the one who would protect the house, not sell it, not waste it. And she was right. I had no intention of ever giving it up. At the time, my brothers said nothing more than a few bitter comments. They let it go, or at least, I thought they did. I didn't realize that seeds of resentment had already been planted deep in their hearts. The first sign came a year later. I had gone to the house for a week in summer, planning to do some repairs. The roof needed patching, and the garden had grown wild. When I arrived, I found Andre and Maxim there already, drinking beer on the porch as if they owned the place. "What are you doing here?" I asked, surprised. Andre grinned. "We missed the place. Thought we'd come for a few days. You don't mind, do you?" Of course, I didn't mind them visiting. They were my brothers, and this was still a family home. But something about the way they acted, so casual, so entitled, bothered me. I brushed it off, though, not wanting to start a fight. It wasn't until later that evening, when we sat by the fire pit, that Andre brought it up. "You know, Alex," he said, poking the flames with a stick, "this place could make serious money. People pay a fortune for lake houses on rental sites. We could fix it up, list it online, and split the profit." Maxim nodded eagerly. "Yeah, think about it. It just sits here most of the year. Why not make it work for us?" I felt my stomach tighten. "No," I said firmly. "This house isn't for profit. It's for family. It's for memories. That's what grandmother wanted." Andre's grin faded into a scowl. "Memories don't pay bills. Alex, you're being selfish, holding onto this place when it could benefit all of us." I shook my head. "It's not about selfishness. It's about respect. She trusted me with this house, and I won't turn it into a business." The conversation ended there, but the tension lingered in the air. I knew then that this wasn't the end of it. My brothers wanted the house for profit, and they weren't going to give up easily. After that first tense conversation by the fire pit, I thought perhaps my brothers would let the matter drop. I hoped they would respect my decision and the wishes of our late grandmother. But deep down, I knew better. Andre and Maxim were never ones to give up once they set their minds on something, especially when it involved money. The following weeks were filled with subtle tests of my patience. They called me frequently, not just to chat, but to suggest improvements to the house that might increase its rental value. Andre would ask, "What if we renovate the kitchen and add a hot tub? Guests would pay double." Maxim, quieter but no less persistent, would chime in, "Or maybe set up a little dock for boats. People love lakes." They framed it as helpful suggestions, as if I couldn't see the potential for profit myself, but I knew their motives were selfish. One evening, I received an unexpected text from Andre. "We are coming this weekend. We need to discuss the house in person. Don't make plans." Something in the tone of the message unsettled me. I replied curtly, "I'll be at the house, but we are not discussing renting it out." I thought that would settle the matter. I was wrong. Friday evening, Andre and Maxim arrived. They had packed tools, laptops, and blueprints of renovations. I welcomed them, albeit tensely, and we sat in the living room. The familiar smell of pine and old wood surrounding us. "Look, Alex," Andre began, spreading out the plans on the coffee table. "We are serious. We've calculated potential revenue, expenses, everything. You'd be crazy not to consider it." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "I'm not crazy. I'm just respecting the house and grandmother's wishes. I won't turn it into a business." Maxim interjected nervously, But Alex, think about it. It could fund your studies, your savings. It's a waste to let it sit empty half the year. I shook my head firmly. No. I didn't inherit this house for money. I inherited it to keep it safe, to honor our grandmother's memory. That's not something I'm willing to compromise. For a while, there was silence. Then Andre's expression hardened. You know, it's funny how the eldest and responsible always gets everything. You act like you're the only one who can make decisions, but maybe you're just scared of taking a chance. I clenched my jaw. This isn't about fear. This is about respect. And I don't need to take chances with something that doesn't belong to me to risk. The house belongs to me. I decide its purpose. Maxim's face fell. He looked at Andre, as if silently asking for backup. Andre gave him a brief nod, almost imperceptible, and then turned his gaze back to me, eyes hard. I hope you know you're making this personal, Andre said. We'll see if you still feel the same way in a few months. The tension was palpable. I realized then that this wasn't going to be a simple disagreement. My brothers were planning something, and I didn't yet know how far they were willing to go. Over the next month, the dynamic between us shifted. Calls became more frequent, and conversations more pointed. Every time I mentioned maintaining the house or visiting for personal reasons, Andre would ask, "And the potential income, Alex? Are you ignoring that too?" Maxim, always the quieter one, began leaving little notes in the house, plans folded neatly on the kitchen table, suggestions for renovations, and screenshots of successful rental properties. It was more than annoyance. It was a psychological push, an attempt to wear me down. I stayed firm, but the stress began to accumulate. Friends noticed my tense demeanor, and even I had to admit the situation was taking a toll on my mental health. Yet I refused to back down. I began documenting everything: emails, messages, notes, and photographs of my brothers when they came to the property. It felt extreme, but I had a gut feeling that they might attempt something more serious. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I was sitting on the porch reading when I heard the gravel crunching under tires. My heart sank. I knew who it was before they even stepped out of the car. Andre and Maxim had come, unannounced, and with a look of determination I hadn't seen before. They didn't greet me. They went straight to the house, carrying suitcases and boxes. "Alex," Andre said, setting down a heavy bag, "we are staying here for the week. We need to work on plans for the house." I stood up, my voice firm. "You are not staying here. I've told you before. The house is mine. You don't get to make these decisions or move in without my permission." Maxim's face twisted in frustration. "Why are you being like this? We are your brothers." "You are my brothers, yes," I replied, "but this house is mine, and I will not allow it to be turned into a business or occupied without my consent. You need to leave." Andre laughed bitterly, almost mockingly. "You're impossible. You really think holding on to it like this proves anything? You're selfish, Alex. You're scared. That's all it is." I didn't respond. I refused to argue further, but I knew then that reasoning with them was useless. They had crossed a line. 2 nights later, I woke to the sound of creaking floorboards and the faintest whisper. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but then I heard it again, louder this time. Someone was in the house. My heart raced as I grabbed my phone and flashlight. I followed the sound, creeping down the hall toward the living room. And there they were, Andre and Maxim, trying to open the cabinet where I kept old family documents and keepsakes. "What are you doing?" I shouted. They froze, caught red-handed. Andre stepped back, feigning innocence. "Alex, we just wanted to check something. Nothing serious." I felt anger boil up inside me. "You broke into the house without permission. You are trespassing. Get out. Now." Maxim looked ashamed, but Andre's expression was defiant. "You're overreacting. It's still our family house too, isn't it?" "No, it's mine," I said, my voice cold. "I warned you. You have no right to take what isn't yours." After that night, I changed the locks and installed alarms. The breach of trust was complete. I realized then that this was no longer just a disagreement. It was a fight that could escalate even further. Sitting alone in the quiet house afterward, I reflected on everything. Childhood memories flashed before my eyes, the laughter of summers past, the warmth of my grandmother's hugs, the gentle lessons she had taught us about family and respect. I realized that the house was more than wood and walls. It was a repository of love, a symbol of everything our grandmother had tried to instill in us. I made a silent vow: I would protect this house at all costs. Not for profit, not for recognition, but for memory, for family, and for myself. No matter what my brothers did, no matter how far they would go, I would not compromise. The days after the attempted break-in were tense. I spent every spare moment at the lake house, making sure all doors and windows were secure, installing extra lighting, and documenting every detail of the intrusion. Yet despite my vigilance, the psychological toll of my brother's persistence weighed heavily on me. Sleep came fitfully, and even during the day, my mind churned with worry. I could feel the line between family loyalty and betrayal blurring. Andre and Maxim didn't give up. They began to escalate their efforts in ways that were subtle, almost insidious. Emails arrived, polite on the surface but laced with pressure. "We are just trying to help," Andre would write. Maxim sent spreadsheets with projected rental incomes, schedules, and even mock reviews from imaginary tenants. Each message tested my patience, aimed at chipping away at my resolve. I ignored most of them, but some slipped through my mental defenses. Gnawing at me late at night. One morning, I arrived at the house to find a small pile of letters on the porch. They weren't sent through the post, they had been slipped under the door, wrapped in thin paper and folded neatly. Andre's handwriting was unmistakable. Each letter carried the same message: think about the opportunities you're missing. It doesn't have to be confrontational. We just want what's best for all of us. Beneath the polite tone, though, I sensed an edge, a veiled threat. They weren't just asking anymore. They were insisting, and the insistence carried an undercurrent of entitlement. I crumpled the letters, feeling a mix of anger and pity. I remembered my grandmother's words: a house carries memory. Protect it. Honor it. And that vow kept me grounded. I decided that confrontation was inevitable. Ignoring their persistence was no longer an option. They were testing the limits of my patience. And soon, those limits would be tested physically. It was a warm Friday afternoon when Andre and Maxim arrived again. This time, they brought a moving van and a small team of laborists. I had seen this coming, but nothing could prepare me for the shock of seeing them take action without consent. Andre stepped out first, looking self-assured. "Alex," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "we thought you'd appreciate seeing how easy it is to make the house profitable. Don't worry, we are being careful." I felt my blood run cold. "You brought movers?" I asked incredulously. "This isn't a rental property. It's not for you to move into. And it's certainly not for you to profit from. Leave. Now." Maxim looked uneasy, shuffling his feet. "Alex, we can make this work for everyone. Please, just consider it." "No," I said firmly. "I will not compromise. You are trespassing. Leave this property immediately, or I will call the authorities." The tension escalated when Andre refused to move the van. He stood in front of the driveway, arms crossed. "You think you can just control everything? This is ridiculous. You're acting like a tyrant, Alex." I stepped forward, trying to reason with him. "It's not tyranny. It's respect, for me, for the house, for grandmother's memory. You cannot make decisions about my property." Maxim lingered behind Andre, whispering, "Maybe we should just leave. This is getting out of hand." But Andre wouldn't back down. He made a sudden move toward the van's driver, gesturing wildly. I instinctively stepped in, trying to block him. Our confrontation grew heated, voices rising, until the laborists looked at us nervously. The situation escalated further when Maxim, frustrated, accidentally knocked over a stack of boxes containing family keepsakes. The crash of old photo albums and handwritten letters hitting the floor made my chest tighten. I rushed forward, heart racing. "Stop! These are memories, not merchandise." Andre laughed bitterly. "Memories don't pay the bills, Alex. You're holding us back." By the next day, I knew the conflict couldn't remain personal. It had crossed into potential criminal activity. I called the local police to report the trespassing and theft of personal property. The officers were polite but firm. They explained that I would need to provide proof that the house was mine, and that my brothers had no claim to it. I spent hours gathering documents, the grandmother's will, property deeds, photographs, emails, and messages. I created a timeline of all interactions, the break-in attempt, and the moving van incident. Every detail mattered. My resolve hardened. I wasn't just protecting a house anymore. I was defending family history, memories, and my rights as the sole heir. I reached out to my brothers, hoping to find a peaceful resolution. I proposed mediation, a neutral third party to help us navigate the dispute. Andre scoffed at the idea. Mediation. That's just a delay tactic. You're trying to hold all the cards. Maxim appeared more hesitant. Maybe it's worth trying, but I don't know if Andre will agree. Andre ignored him. We don't need a mediator. We need to do what's right. And what's right is using the house to its potential. I realized then that mediation was futile. My brothers had crossed from persuasion into obsession. Their vision of what's right did not include respect for anyone else, not even family. During one particularly tense evening, I found an old journal in the house, my grandmother's, hidden in a drawer beneath the fireplace. I read through the pages, finding notes about her life, her thoughts on family, and why she had left the house solely to me. She wrote about her fears that my brothers, though well-intentioned at times, were impulsive and focused too much on material gain. She expressed a hope that I would protect the house, its memories, and its legacy. Reading her words filled me with both sadness and determination. It became clear, my grandmother had anticipated this conflict. She had chosen me because she knew I could resist temptation and honor the house for what it truly was. This knowledge strengthened my resolve. By the end of that week, tensions had reached a breaking point. Andre and Maxim had attempted to bring in additional helpers to continue renovations while I wasn't home, leaving threatening messages implying that I couldn't control the situation forever. The psychological pressure was immense, but I stayed focused. I had to protect the house. I began researching legal measures, speaking with property lawyers, and preparing for the inevitable court battle. I realized that my brothers' ambition had crossed from family disagreement into deliberate interference with my property rights. Every action I took, every precaution, was now part of a larger strategy, not just for protection, but for justice. That night, I sat alone in the house, listening to the wind rustling through the pine trees and the soft lap of the lake against the shore. I thought about my brothers, about childhood, and about the house itself. This place was more than wood and nails. It was a repository of memories, a symbol of love, and a testament to our grandmother's foresight and wisdom. I knew that the coming days would test everything, my patience, my resolve, and my belief in family. But I also knew one thing for certain: I would not give up. Not now. Not ever. The days after the moving van incident were tense beyond anything I had experienced before. The house felt less like a sanctuary and more like a battleground. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind through the pine trees, reminded me that the struggle with my brothers was far from over. I realized that their persistence wasn't going to stop. They were determined to take what they believed they were entitled to, and I was determined not to let them. After consulting with a property lawyer, I filed a formal complaint for trespassing, attempted theft, and interference with my property. It was not a decision I took lightly. I had hoped, for as long as possible, to resolve this privately. But Andre and Maxim had forced my hand. The lawyer, a meticulous man named Mr. Levin, laid out the strategy. "Alex," he said, reviewing the documents and emails, "we have a strong case. Your grandmothers will clearly name you as the sole heir. You have evidence of the trespass, the moving van incident, and the messages. We can take this to court and get a restraining order if necessary." I nodded, trying to remain calm. I just want to protect the house. I don't want to ruin our relationship completely, but I'll do whatever it takes to keep the house safe. "Sometimes, Alex," Mr. Levin said gently, Protecting what's yours is the only way to preserve it. Family or not, the law is clear. The day of the first court hearing arrived with a crisp autumn sky. I remember standing outside the courthouse, the weight of what was about to happen pressing on my shoulders. Andre and Maxim arrived shortly after, flanked by their own legal representation. They were both immaculately dressed, smiles too tight, eyes calculating. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. The judge, a stern woman with sharp eyes, called the session to order. Andre and Maxim Petrov, the judge said, you are here today regarding allegations of trespassing and interference with property owned by your brother, Alexander Petrov. How do you plead? Andre leaned forward. Your Honor, we are not trespassers. This is a family house. We are merely exercising what we believe are our rights to use and manage it responsibly. I held my breath as Maxim added, yes, Your Honor. We mean no harm. We only want what's best for the house and the family. The judge raised an eyebrow. Mr. Petrov, she said, turning to me, please explain your position. I stood and recounted the events, the will naming me as the sole heir, the break-in attempt, the moving van incident, the theft of personal items, and the letters and messages pressuring me to cede control. I described how I had changed the locks and installed alarms, and how I had been forced to document every interaction to protect the house. Andre and Maxim's lawyer presented a carefully constructed argument. They claimed that as siblings, they had an inherent interest in the house, that the house was a family asset, and that my refusal to allow shared use was unreasonable. They tried to frame my actions as selfish, painting me as the antagonist in what they called a family dispute. The courtroom was silent as I listened to the claims. Every word felt like a challenge to not just my ownership, but to the memories and values my grandmother had instilled in me. When I spoke again, I calmly rebutted every point. I emphasized the legality of the will, the documented evidence of trespass, and the emotional significance of the house. I made it clear that this wasn't about money or control. It was about preserving the legacy of my grandmother and protecting the family home from being exploited. The conflict wasn't confined to the courtroom. Outside, tensions were palpable. Friends and extended family took sides, some supporting me, others siding with my brothers. Rumors spread about the family feud over the lake house, and social media posts from acquaintances added fuel to the fire. I found myself retreating to the house more often, seeking solace in the familiar creak of the floorboards, the smell of pine, and the memories that only the house could hold. At night, I would sit on the porch, watching the moonlight shimmer across the lake, reminding myself why I was fighting Andre and Maxim's persistence. Began to take a toll on relationships beyond just the house. Extended family members whispered about who was right or wrong. Cousins took sides, and holiday gatherings became tense and awkward. The idea of family unity seemed increasingly like a fragile illusion. Despite this, I tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. I continued visiting the house, tending to repairs, and keeping the property in good condition. Each day, I reminded myself that my grandmother's wishes were paramount. This house was not just a structure, it was a symbol of love, memory, and family heritage. A few weeks into the legal process, I stumbled upon additional evidence that would prove crucial. While cleaning the attic, I found old letters and notes from my grandmother, detailing her concerns about Andre and Maxim's impulsive tendencies and their focus on material gain. She had explicitly written that she trusted me to protect the house and maintain its purpose as a family sanctuary. This evidence bolstered my case significantly. It showed not only her intentions but also her foresight in naming me as the sole heir. I carefully catalogued these documents, knowing that they could turn the tide of the court battle in my favor. The judge's ruling in the first hearing was a partial victory. She granted a temporary restraining order, preventing Andre and Maxim from entering the property or making any alterations. While it didn't resolve the long-term legal dispute, it provided immediate protection and a sense of relief. Outside the courthouse, I felt a mix of triumph and exhaustion. I knew the battle was far from over, but at least for now, the house was safe. Andre's expression was unreadable, but I could see the simmering anger in his eyes. Maxim looked despondent, a mixture of guilt and frustration evident on his face. That night, Back at the house, I sat by the lake, the cool breeze brushing against my face. I thought about everything, the childhood summers, the laughter of my brothers, the wisdom of my grandmother, and the betrayal that had driven a wedge between us. I realized that the fight over the house wasn't just about property or money. It was about values, respect, and the choices we make to honor those we love. I knew that the coming months would test my resolve, my patience, and my belief in family. But I also knew that I would never waver in protecting the legacy of the house, the memories it held, and the trust my grandmother had placed in me after the temporary restraining order. I thought the immediate threat had been neutralized. The house felt safer, at least in terms of physical access. Yet I knew my brothers were not the type to accept defeat quietly. Andre's ambition and Maxim's loyalty to him were a dangerous combination. Their sense of entitlement would drive them to push the limits. And I had to be ready. The following weeks were filled with tension. Every phone call, every message from Andre and Maxim carried a subtle edge, a veiled warning. Andre began exploring legal loopholes, suggesting to his lawyer that I was preventing them from exercising family rights. Maxim, quieter but just as insistent, tried to coax me into compromise, appealing to family sentiment, claiming that I was destroying our relationship over a house. I refused. I knew compromise, in this case, would not protect the house. It would open the door for exploitation and further trespassing. I decided to step up security measures. Cameras were installed around the perimeter of the house, motion sensors activated, and I even set up remote alerts on my phone to monitor any unusual activity. The house that once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a fortress. Every night, I would check the cameras, sometimes until the early hours of the morning, making sure there were no intruders. The constant vigilance wore on me, but I reminded myself that protecting the house was worth the sacrifice. The first full court hearing was scheduled a month later. I arrived early, documents and evidence in hand. Andre and Maxim were already there, sitting confidently, exuding a sense of entitlement that made my skin crawl. Their lawyer approached me briefly, smiling thinly. "We are going to settle this amicably, Alexander. Don't make it personal." I nodded politely, but inside, I felt a storm of emotions. This had already become personal. It wasn't just a legal matter. It was about family, memory, and respect. When the hearing began, I took the stand. I described everything in detail: the grandmother's will, the previous break-in, the letters, the moving van incident, and my brother's persistent pressure. I presented photographs, emails, and video footage from the security cameras. Andre and Maxim's lawyer tried to cast doubt, arguing that my brothers had a moral right to use the house and that I was being unreasonable. But I countered with the legal documentation, highlighting that the house was solely mine, legally, and that any attempt to interfere was a violation of my rights. The judge listened carefully, occasionally asking clarifying questions. It was clear she understood the gravity of the situation even outside the courtroom. The tension continued to escalate. Extended family members became involved, some taking sides with my brothers, others supporting me. Social media posts added fuel to the fire, spreading rumors and opinionated commentary. I spent more time at the house, both to protect it and to preserve my sanity. I would walk along the lakeshore, letting the calm waters help me think. I reminded myself why I was fighting, not for money, but for memories, for legacy, and for the trust my grandmother had placed in me. The strain was immense. Sleepless nights, constant vigilance, and the emotional toll of family betrayal weighed heavily on me. Yet, every time I saw the sun reflect on the lake, or the familiar shadows of the trees dancing in the wind, I felt renewed determination. Andre and Maxim began trying new tactics. They sent letters claiming that I was isolating myself from family, accusing me of selfishness, and attempting to guilt me into relinquishing control. Maxim occasionally tried to approach me privately, appealing to our childhood memories, to the love and bond we once shared. I listened politely, but my resolve remained unshaken. I knew that any concession would only embolden them further. Their goal was control, not compromise. In the midst of this turmoil, an unexpected ally emerged. My cousin Dmitri, who had always remained neutral, stepped forward. He had spent time at the lake house with me over the years and understood the importance of preserving it. Dmitri offered to testify on my behalf, describing the house's significance and corroborating my claims about my brother's attempts to seize control. His support was a morale boost. It reminded me that even in times of conflict, there were people who understood the importance of family, legacy, and respect. I knew that the legal battle was only going to intensify. Andrei and Maxim were already consulting multiple lawyers, strategizing ways to challenge the will and question my ownership. I spent hours preparing, reviewing legal documents, gathering additional evidence, and making detailed notes for potential court testimonies. It became clear that this wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about a larger principle: honoring promises, respecting family legacies, and standing firm in the face of pressure. The nights grew longer and more tense. I often stayed awake, listening to the wind rustle through the trees, occasionally glancing at the lake as moonlight danced across the water. I checked the cameras repeatedly, ensuring no one was approaching. One night, I saw shadows moving near the back of the house. My heart raced. I quickly grabbed my phone and flashlight, shining it toward the movement. It was nothing, just a deer wandering near the property, but it reminded me that I couldn't let my guard down. Every shadow could represent a threat. The constant stress began to weigh on me emotionally. I found myself thinking about my grandmother more than ever, remembering her words about family, respect, and memory. Her wisdom guided me, reminding me why I was fighting. Despite the pressure, I refused to let anger or resentment control me. I remained focused on protecting the house, maintaining my integrity, and honoring my grandmother's wishes. One morning, I received a letter slipped under the door. It was unsigned, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Andrei's. You can't hide forever, Alex. The house will be ours, one way or another. You can choose to fight, or you can choose peace. I crumpled the letter, anger mixing with determination. Their threat was clear, but it only strengthened my resolve. The house was not just a building, it was a repository of love, memory, and family history. I would protect it at all costs. Sitting alone that night, I reflected on how far this conflict had escalated. The house, once a place of joy and childhood wonder, had become a symbol of a larger struggle, a test of values, principles, and resilience. I realized that the coming weeks and months would be challenging. Andrei and Maxim were relentless, and the legal battle was far from over. But I also knew that I was prepared. I had the law on my side, evidence to support my claims, and the moral conviction to see this fight through. The lake shimmered under the moonlight, and for a moment, I felt a sense of peace. This house, this sanctuary, would endure, and so would. The courtroom had become a stage where more than just the ownership of the house was being fought. It had turned into a battlefield for family honor, memory, and principle. Each hearing felt like a trial not just of law, but of loyalty and trust. Andrei and Maxim's determination seemed to grow with every session. Every argument, every motion, every subtle attempt to sway the judge underscored how far they were willing to go. I arrived at the courthouse early that day, carrying stacks of documents, letters, and photographs. Dmitri, my cousin and unexpected ally, was already there. His calm presence reassured me. Even in the storm of family conflict, he had reminded me that there were still people who understood the true meaning of the house. The judge entered promptly, her expression stern, eyes scanning the room. Andrei and Maxim were seated side by side, whispering with their lawyer. There was a quiet confidence in their demeanor, almost arrogance. They believed they had crafted arguments that could undermine my ownership and challenge the will. Mr. Petrov, the judge said, turning to me, we will begin with any new evidence you wish to present. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, laying out the recent findings, my grandmother's journal, her letters describing her intentions, and the documentation of past break-ins and threats. I detailed every attempt my brothers had made to interfere with the property and emphasized the emotional significance of the house. Andrei's lawyer countered, claiming that my brothers were unfairly restricted from exercising what they considered family rights. They argued that the house was a shared family legacy, not mine alone, attempting to appeal to emotion rather than law. I felt a pang of frustration but maintained composure. This wasn't about winning popularity. It was about defending what was rightfully mine and protecting the memories of my childhood and my grandmother's foresight. During a recess, I reviewed some of the older letters and notes I had collected over the years. Among them, I discovered something I hadn't noticed before. My grandmother had written extensively about past incidents involving Andrei and Maxim's impulsiveness. She had recounted times when their decisions had caused chaos in family businesses, leading to financial loss and emotional strain. Reading these letters, I understood why she had entrusted the house solely to me. She had seen my patience, responsibility, and respect for family legacy. She had anticipated that if left unchecked, my brother's impulsive tendencies could turn a cherished home into a source of conflict. This revelation strengthened my resolve. I realized that the legal battle wasn't just about ownership. It was about proving that foresight, responsibility, and respect mattered more than greed and entitlement outside the courtroom. The brothers' desperation began to show. Andrei, normally confident, had started to make more aggressive moves. Rumors of attempted manipulations, contacting local contractors to survey the house without permission, and subtle threats circulated. Maxim, while still loyal to Andrei, began expressing doubts privately, worried that their actions could irreparably harm the family bond. I stayed focused. I documented everything meticulously, ensuring that any attempt to bypass legal boundaries would be clearly recorded and presented in court. One afternoon, I returned to the house after a long day at the courthouse, only to find signs of intrusion. Doors that I was certain were locked had been tampered with, and some minor items appeared moved. It wasn't a full break-in, but it was enough to show that my brothers were escalating their efforts. I confronted them when they arrived shortly after, standing face to face in the kitchen. "Alex," Andrei began, his voice deceptively calm. "We were just checking the property. Don't be so dramatic." "Checking?" I asked, voice tight. "You tampered with the locks. You entered without permission. This is trespassing, Andrei." Maxim looked conflicted, biting his lip. "Maybe we went too far," he murmured. Andrei shot him a sharp glance. "Stay out of this, Maxim." "Alex, you're being unreasonable." I clenched my fists. "No. This ends now. I've warned you, I've taken legal action, and I will not compromise." The tension was palpable. The emotional stakes were higher than ever. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was a battleground of principles and family integrity. Back in the courtroom, the legal battle intensified. My lawyers emphasized the legitimacy of the will, the repeated trespassing incidents, and the clear intention of my grandmother. Andrei and Maxim's lawyers tried to introduce vague claims about shared family rights and implied past agreements. It was a tense game of strategy. Every document, every witness testimony, and every piece of evidence mattered. The judge was meticulous, scrutinizing every detail. I could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on me, but I remained steadfast. The conflict began to affect more than just legal matters. Friends and distant family members took sides, sometimes offering support, other times questioning my decisions. Social gatherings became strained. Conversations often revolved around the ongoing feud. At night, I would walk along the lake, reflecting on the childhood summers, my grandmother's teachings, and the laughter that once filled the house. The memories were bittersweet, a reminder of what was at stake and why I had to persevere amid the turmoil. I found allies in unexpected places, longtime neighbors, who had known my grandmother and spent time with us at the house, offered to testify about the significance of the property. They described the traditions, the family events, and the care that my grandmother had invested in maintaining the house as a sanctuary. This support bolstered my case, reminding me that even in the midst of conflict, the truth and the importance of heritage could shine through. The next court date approached, and I prepared meticulously. I reviewed every letter, photograph, and piece of evidence, anticipating the arguments my brothers would present. I rehearsed my testimony, ensuring I could remain calm and focused under pressure. Each day at the house, I continued to maintain security measures, documenting any suspicious activity. The battle was far from over. and I knew my brothers might attempt further escalatio that night. I sat by the fireplace, the journal of my grandmother open beside me. Her words, written decades earlier, resonated with me more than ever. Protect the house, honor the memories, and never let greed or impulsiveness tarnish what we hold dear. Her guidance was a compass, a source of strength. I realized that the fight over the house wasn't just about property. It was a test of character, of patience, and of the values she had instilled in me. I knew the next steps would be critical. My brothers were relentless, the legal battle would be intense, and the emotional toll immense. But I was ready. I would protect the house, honor my grandmother's legacy, and see this conflict through to its conclusion, no matter the cost. The next court hearing felt more like a battlefield than a legal proceeding. Every detail mattered. Every witness, every document, every word spoken had the power to sway the outcome. The weeks of preparation, sleepless nights, and constant vigilance had led to this moment. I arrived early at the courthouse, carrying stacks of documents, photographs, and my grandmother's journal. Dmitri, my cousin, had agreed to testify on my behalf, and a few neighbors and family friends were also prepared to speak about the importance of the house. Andrei and Maxim arrived shortly after, exuding confidence and determination. As if the court was there, staged to challenge me, the judge called the court to order. Andrei and Maxim's lawyer went first, arguing that the house was a family legacy and that my refusal to share or allow participation was unreasonable. They presented a mixture of legal arguments and emotional appeals, suggesting that the house was a shared inheritance by tradition, if not by law. When it was my turn, I stood and presented my case clearly, calmly, and firmly. I explained the details of my grandmother's will, her specific instructions that I was to inherit and protect the house, and the repeated incidents of trespassing and interference by my brothers. I emphasized the emotional and historical significance of the property and the importance of maintaining it as a sanctuary. Rather than turning it into a commercial venture, Dmitri was the first to testify. He described his experiences at the house over the years, recounting summers, family gatherings, and the traditions that my grandmother had upheld. He explained how the house had always been a place of memory and love, and how Alexander had consistently honored his grandmother's wishes by preserving its essence. Next, neighbors and family friends spoke. They testified about the care and attention Alexander had given to the property, his vigilance in maintaining it, and the importance of the house as a cultural and emotional landmark in the family. Their words reinforced the narrative that Alexander was the rightful and responsible caretaker. When my brothers took the stand, the tension in the room was palpable. Andrei presented his arguments with his usual confidence, claiming that they only wanted to maximize the house's potential for the benefit of all. Maxim, quieter and more hesitant, expressed concern over family conflict but seemed torn between loyalty to his brother and the law. During cross-examination, Andrei's lawyer tried to undermine the testimony of the witnesses, suggesting bias and exaggeration. But Alexander's lawyer anticipated this and presented corroborating evidence, photographs, letters, and detailed documentation of the incidents, including the break-in and moving van events. Andrei and Maxim struggled to provide clear answers, often deflecting or contradicting each other. Their desperation became evident, and their credibility weakened. The court proceedings were tense, each side presenting arguments, counter-arguments, and evidence meticulously dotted. A pivotal moment occurred when a sealed envelope from my grandmother's personal files was presented in court. It contained detailed notes about her reasons for leaving the house solely to Alexander. She had documented her observations of Andrei and Maxim's impulsiveness and material-focused tendencies, warning that they might misuse the property if given control. The judge read the contents aloud, and a hush fell over the courtroom. The evidence was clear. My grandmother had anticipated potential conflicts and had chosen Alexander as the custodian of the house with full intention. The revelation shocked Andrei and Maxim, undermining their claims and exposing the depth of foresight in my grandmother's decisions. Their faces showed a mix of anger, disbelief, and a growing realization that the battle was tilting against them. Sitting in the courtroom, I felt the weight of the past weeks and months pressing down on me. The legal battle, the betrayal of my brothers, and the constant vigilance had taken a toll. Yet, I also felt a sense of clarity and resolve. Every memory of my grandmother, every summer spent by the lake, every lesson she had imparted, reminded me why I was fighting. This house was not just a building. It was a repository of love, memory, and legacy. Protecting it was about more than law. It was about honor, integrity, and respect for family history. After several hours of testimony and deliberation, the judge issued a preliminary ruling. She reaffirmed Alexander's sole ownership of the property, upheld the restraining order against Andrei and Maxim, and acknowledged the significance of the grandmother's intentions as documented in the will and personal notes. The ruling was a critical victory. Though the legal battle was not fully concluded, appeals and additional motions were possible, but the court had recognized the validity of Alexander's claims and the legitimacy of his ownership. Outside the courthouse, the air was crisp with the onset of autumn. I felt a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and cautious optimism. The house was legally secure for the time being, though I knew vigilance was still required. Andrei and Maxim were quiet, their expressions a mixture of disappointment and frustration. Realizing that their attempts to manipulate or override my ownership had failed, I returned to the lake house, stepping onto the familiar porch as the wind rustled through the pine trees. The lake shimmered in the afternoon sun, and for a moment, the tension lifted. Memories of childhood laughter, summer adventures, and grandmother's wisdom filled my mind, reminding me why the fight had been worth it. Sitting by the lake that evening, I reflected on everything that had transpired. The battle over the house had tested my patience, my resolve, and my belief in family. But it had also reinforced the importance of principles, foresight, and honoring the legacy of those who came before us. I realized that the house was more than wood, walls, and furniture. It was a symbol of love, memory, and the careful choices that shape our lives. Protecting it had required courage, persistence, and faith in what was right. And though the legal battle might continue, I knew one thing for certain: the house would endure, as would the values it represented. My grandmother's legacy was secure, and I would ensure that it remained a sanctuary for the family, preserved in memory, respect, and honor. The court's preliminary ruling had brought a sense of relief, but I knew the battle wasn't fully over. Andrei and Maxim were defeated in the courtroom for now, but their persistence and sense of entitlement meant they could try again, perhaps with more cunning. The house was safe legally, but safeguarding it fully required more than law. It required vigilance, foresight, and rebuilding the emotional balance of the family. I returned to the lake house, the familiar creak of the wooden porch under my feet, and breathed in the crisp autumn air. The smell of pine and lake water brought a sense of calm I hadn't felt in months. This house, with its memories and legacy, was mine to protect, and I would not falter. The first priority was security and preservation. I installed additional locks, reinforced doors and windows, and updated the security system to include cameras, motion sensors, and remote alerts. Every corner of the house was documented meticulously: photographs of rooms, inventory of furniture and heirlooms, and digital backups of important family documents. This process was more than practical. It was therapeutic. Each photograph, each careful cataloging, reminded me why I was fighting. It wasn't about wealth or control. It was about preserving the essence of my grandmother's life and the childhood summers that shaped me and my brothers. While legal battles had separated us, I knew that eventually, family needed to heal. I reached out to Maxim privately, sensing his hesitation and doubt over Andrei's more aggressive actions. We met at a quiet cafe in town. "Alex," Maxim said, staring at his hands, I don't want to fight anymore. I just want some peace. Andrei, he's too focused on what he wants." "I understand, Maxim," I replied gently. "This isn't about revenge. I want the family to heal, but the house has to be protected. That's what grandmother would have wanted." He nodded, a sense of relief evident on his face. "I'm willing to step back. I don't want to lose the connection we once had." This conversation reminded me that even in conflict, there could be bridges built with patience and understanding. Maxim's willingness to reconsider gave me hope that one day, Andre too might see reason. Andre, however, was relentless. In the weeks following the court ruling, he attempted to challenge minor aspects of the judgment, filing motions and claims questioning procedural details. I responded meticulously, working with my lawyers to counter each attempt with precise evidence and clear documentation. During this period, I also discovered that Andre had tried to influence contractors and neighbors, seeking support for his claims. Once again, documentation proved crucial. Letters, emails, and recorded communications clearly demonstrated his attempts at manipulation. The legal system, though slow and demanding, had now become a tool for clarity and justice. Each step reinforced the house's protection and underscored the importance of thorough preparation despite the ongoing legal complexities. I focused on preserving the emotional heart of the house. I spent weekends at the property, tending the garden, repairing the old dock, and restoring family memorabilia. Each act of care was a tribute to my grandmother's memory and a way to reclaim the house from the shadows of conflict. Neighbors and family friends, witnessing these efforts, began to show renewed support. Simple acts like helping with repairs or attending a weekend gathering at the lake brought warmth back to the property. The house slowly transformed from a site of legal conflict into a living, breathing space of memory and renewal. A quiet afternoon revealed an unexpected change. Andre came by the property, not with movers or threats, but hesitantly, almost sheepishly. I met him on the porch. "Alex, I wanted to see the house," he said. "I realize now, maybe I've been wrong. I didn't see what it really means to you, to all of us. I was blinded by what I thought we could gain." I studied him carefully. His tone was genuine, lacking the defiance I had come to expect. "Andre, the house isn't about gain. It's about memory, respect, and family. I won't allow it to be exploited, but I want you to understand its value beyond money." He nodded slowly, emotion flickering in his eyes. "I understand now. I'm sorry for everything." Over the next few weeks, Andre and I began to rebuild a fragile trust. We started small, cleaning the garden together, organizing family memorabilia, and revisiting old photographs. Conversations grew longer, more sincere, and for the first time in months, laughter returned to the house. Maxim joined us often, helping to restore the dock and tending the small vegetable garden that had always been a favorite project during our childhood. The three of us, once torn by conflict, began to reconnect, not as co-owners, but as brothers honoring the legacy of the grandmother, who had entrusted me with this sanctuary. One evening, sitting on the porch, I looked out over the lake. The water reflected the orange and gold hues of autumn, and the wind carried the gentle scent of pine. I realized how much this house had taught me, not just about responsibility, but about patience, resilience, and the enduring strength of family bonds. The legal battles had been arduous, the emotional toll heavy, but every step reinforced the importance of integrity and foresight. Protecting the house had been more than preserving property. It had been about safeguarding memory, legacy, and the trust placed in me by someone I loved deeply. I knew that challenges might arise in the future, but for now, the house stood secure, the family bonds mended, and the legacy of my grandmother honored. The lake house, once a source of conflict, had become a symbol of reconciliation and resilience. Summer breezes, laughter, and the quiet serenity of the property reminded us that memory and love could withstand even the harshest trials. As night fell, I walked to the dock, the soft water lapping at my feet. I thought of my grandmother, her foresight, and the lessons she had left behind. Protecting the house had not only preserved her legacy, it had strengthened me, my brothers, and the bonds that had once seemed irreparably broken. The house, the memories, and the love it contained would endure. And so would we. The weeks following, Andre's acknowledgement of the house's true significance were filled with a slow but steady restoration of family harmony. The lake house, once a battleground of wills and ambition, began to regain its original character, a sanctuary of memories, laughter, and connection. Maxim continued to help in practical ways, tending the vegetable garden and repairing the small dock. Andre, while still learning to temper his impulsive tendencies, joined in with growing sincerity. The three of us, once fractured by greed and misunderstandings, were beginning to remember what it meant to be brothers. Our efforts to restore and preserve the house extended beyond physical repairs. We catalogued every piece of memorabilia, every photograph, every handwritten letter from our grandmother. Each item had a story, a memory, a fragment of the past that connected us to our roots. The living room, once cluttered with boxes and evidence of Andre's previous attempts at management, was cleared and arranged to reflect both comfort and heritage. Family portraits, carefully restored, lined the walls. The old fireplace, once neglected, now gleamed with polished brass fixtures and a renewed mantel, holding photographs and mementos from generations past. One weekend, the three of us sat by the lake, sharing stories of summers gone by. We laughed over forgotten games, mishaps with fishing rods, and the silly competitions we had with cousins. Remember the time we tried to build a raft and it sank immediately? Maxim asked, chuckling. Andre smiled, a genuine laugh escaping. Yeah, and Alex was the only one who managed to stay dry. Well, sort of. I shook my head, smiling at the memory. You guys were terrible at teamwork back then. And honestly, nothing much has changed. The moment of levity reminded us that beneath years of conflict and misunderstanding, the bond of brotherhood remained. Neighbors and friends, who had witnessed the previous conflicts, now offered support in the healing process. Some helped with repairs, others contributed food and supplies for weekend gatherings, and a few even offered to help catalogue the house's vast collection of heirlooms. The community's involvement reinforced the sense that the house was not only a personal sanctuary, but a symbol of family and shared history. Each visit reminded us that the lake house held significance beyond our immediate family. It was a place where memories, heritage, and love converged. Throughout this time, I reflected on the lessons learned from the months of conflict. Patience, perseverance, and careful documentation had been critical. Emotional intelligence, remaining calm under pressure, choosing words wisely, and understanding my brothers' motivations had made the difference between escalation and resolution. Andre, too, began to show signs of growth. His acknowledgement of past mistakes and willingness to participate in rebuilding efforts demonstrated that even the most ambitious and impulsive individuals could change when faced with truth, consequence, and reflection. To mark the progress, we hosted a small gathering at the lake house. Extended family, neighbors, and a few close friends attended. It was not a grand celebration but a quiet acknowledgement of reconciliation and progress. We shared meals, told stories, and revisited the lake where so many of our childhood memories had taken place. The house, once a point of contention, now resonated with warmth, laughter, and the subtle sense of security that comes from knowing you've protected something meaningful. Late that evening, after the guests had departed, I sat alone on the porch, gazing at the shimmering reflection of the moon on the lake. The air was cool, crisp, and filled with the scent of pine and water. I thought about my grandmother, her foresight, and the wisdom she had imparted through her will and personal writings. Her insistence on responsible stewardship of the house had guided me through one of the most challenging periods of my life. I realized that legacy was not just about property, it was about values, memory, and the continuity of care and respect across generations. Protecting the house had been about honoring that legacy, preserving it, and ensuring that future generations could experience the same joy and connection I had known as a child. The emotional reconciliation with Andre and Maxim was not instantaneous, but it had begun. Our shared experiences of conflict, reflection, and restoration created a stronger bond. We had learned to listen, to compromise when appropriate, and to respect boundaries. Even simple tasks, like cleaning the garden, restoring furniture, or organizing family photographs, became opportunities for connection. Through these actions, we rebuilt trust and began forming a new chapter of our brotherhood, informed by both past mistakes and present understanding. Recognizing the importance of maintaining security and harmony, we devised a plan for the house's future. A documentation, every piece of property, heirloom, and photograph was catalogued digitally and physically. A maintenance, seasonal repairs and upkeep, were scheduled to prevent decay and ensure the house remained welcoming. A visitation protocols, a clear understanding of who could enter the house, and under what circumstances was established, preventing future misunderstandings. A family gatherings, regular gatherings were planned to maintain emotional connection and prevent isolation or resentment. This structured approach provided a sense of security, ensuring that the house would remain both a sanctuary and a symbol of our family's resilience. Months passed, and the lake house regained its former serenity. The previous tensions, while still remembered, were no longer the dominant narrative. Instead, the house embodied reconciliation, memory, and the enduring power of family bonds. Even Andre, once the source of much conflict, began to embrace the importance of patience, respect, and shared responsibility. Maxim, too, took an active role in preserving both the property and their emotional connections it represented. As I looked across the lake one evening, watching the sun set in brilliant hues of orange and gold, I realized that the house had become more than a home. It had become a testament to resilience, understanding, and the enduring power of legacy. The months following the restoration of the lake house brought a calm that felt almost surreal after the storm of conflict. The legal battles, the emotional strain, the tense confrontations with Andre and Maxim all seemed like distant memories, softened by the quiet serenity of the property and the work we had done to rebuild both the house and our relationships. I stood on the porch one morning, watching the early sunlight glitter across the lake, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. The house had endured the storm, and so had we, though the preliminary ruling had given me temporary legal security. The final hearing brought the formal conclusion of the legal dispute. Andre and Maxim, recognizing the futility of further appeals and influenced by months of reflection, ultimately decided not to contest the ruling further. In court, the judge formally affirmed my sole ownership of the property, acknowledging the documented intentions of our grandmother, the history of past incidents, and my efforts to protect the house. She commended the thoroughness of the documentation and the integrity with which I had handled the matter. The ruling provided permanent legal closure. The house was secure, my grandmother's legacy preserved, and the path was open for emotional healing. After the legal closure, the focus shifted entirely to rebuilding trust and connection. Andre, initially hesitant, began participating in daily activities around the house. We spent hours repairing the dock, clearing overgrown paths, and organizing storage areas. The act of working together, side by side, slowly dissolved the tension that had built over years of conflict. Maxim, naturally reflective and thoughtful, served as a bridge between Andre and me, reminding us of our shared history and the memories that bound us together. One afternoon, as we finished restoring the old boathouse, Andre turned to me. "Alex, I know I made mistakes," he said quietly. "I let ambition blind me, but I want to make things right." I nodded, understanding both the words and the effort behind them. "It's not about what you did wrong. It's about what we do now, together. Let's make sure this place stays what it should be, a home, a sanctuary, a memory." We revived many of the traditions our grandmother had cherished. Summer evenings were once again spent by the lake, sharing meals, telling stories, and enjoying the simple pleasures that had defined our childhood. Family gatherings became a time of celebration rather than tension. Cousins, aunts, uncles, and longtime friends joined in, contributing to a sense of continuity and community. The house became a living testament to family resilience, carrying with it not only memories of the past but hope for the future. The three of us brothers, once fractured and divided by greed and misunderstanding, found joy in shared responsibility and companionship. Each act of care, whether restoring furniture, maintaining the garden, or preparing a family meal, reinforced the bond we had once taken for granted. With the house legally and emotionally secure, I focused on documenting its legacy for future generations. Photographs, letters, and records were digitized and organized, ensuring that the story of the house, its significance, and the lessons it had taught us would endure. I also wrote a detailed journal, recounting the challenges we had faced, the conflicts and reconciliations, and the wisdom imparted by our grandmother. This journal would serve as a guide for future family members, a reminder of the importance of respect, patience, and careful stewardship. Sitting by the lake one evening, watching the sunset, I reflected on everything that had transpired. The house had been more than a property. It had been a catalyst for growth, understanding, and reconciliation. The months of conflict, tension, and legal battles had tested us, but they had also revealed our capacity for resilience and forgiveness. I realized that legacy was not just about material ownership. It was about memory, values, and the choices we make to honor those who came before us. My grandmother had entrusted me with the house not merely because I was capable, but because she believed in the importance of care, respect, and continuity. Andre and Maxim had changed. The lessons of the past months had tempered their impulsiveness and taught them the value of patience and empathy. Our relationships, while still marked by past conflict, were now grounded in understanding and mutual respect. We began planning for the future. Regular family gatherings, seasonal maintenance schedules, and clear guidelines for property use were established. The house was no longer a source of contention but a shared treasure, preserved through care, respect, and shared responsibility. We also began teaching younger family members the significance of the house, sharing stories of our grandmother, the summers spent by the lake, and the values she had instilled in us. It was a way to ensure that the lessons we had learned, and the legacy we had preserved, would continue for generations. One quiet evening, I walked along the lakeshore, the water reflecting the fiery hues of the setting sun. The house stood behind me, strong and welcoming, surrounded by trees that had witnessed generations of our family. The air was filled with the gentle sounds of nature, the subtle rustle of leaves, and the distant call of birds returning to their nests. I realized, with a deep sense of fulfillment, that the battle had not been about winning or losing. It had been about preserving what mattered most: memory, love, and the integrity of our family's legacy. The lake house, once a symbol of conflict, had become a symbol of resilience, care, and reconciliation. And as I looked across the water, I felt a profound connection to my grandmother, to my brothers, and to the family that had endured challenges and emerged stronger. The house, our sanctuary, would continue to stand, not just as a structure of wood and stone, but as a living testament to love, memory, and the power of legacy years later. The lake house remained a gathering place for family and friends. The traditions we had restored endured, and new ones were created. Children laughed by the water. Cousins explored the forests around the property, and the stories of summers past were shared with new generations. Andre and Maxim, once rivals in pursuit of the house, became partners in preserving its beauty and history. The conflicts of the past were remembered, not with bitterness, but as lessons that shaped our choices and strengthened our bond. I often sat on the porch in quiet moments, reflecting on the journey, the trials, the reconciliation, and the triumph of integrity over greed. And I knew, with certainty, that the house, the memories, and the legacy it carried would endure, secure in both lore and heart, for generations to come.